My beloved child. Do not move past this moment too quickly. Let your hand become still. Let the noise around you fade for just a little while, because this fictional story has arrived carrying something your heart may recognize before your mind fully understands it. There is a reason these words feel unusually close tonight. There is a reason your chest tightened when you heard that title. Somewhere beneath the strength you have learned to wear, a quiet part of you has been waiting to hear what happened after you walked away, after you stopped explaining, after you finally became too tired to beg someone to see the value that had always been standing in front of them. Come closer. Something has shifted. Not in the loud, dramatic way you once imagined. Not with thunder shaking the windows or a sudden voice calling your name across the distance. It happened softly, almost invisibly, in the kind of silence that exposes everything a person has tried not to feel. Your soulmate finally understood your worth. But the realization did not arrive when you were still waiting. It did not arrive while your messages remained unanswered and your heart remained open. It did not arrive during the nights when you were willing to forgive one more silence, excuse one more disappointment, or believe one more promise that never became action. It arrived later. And that is why their heart is trembling now. In this cinematic tale, there is a room somewhere beneath a pale evening sky. The light is low. A curtain moves gently near an open window. The world outside continues as if nothing important is happening. Cars pass. Distant voices rise and disappear. A clock advances 1 second at a time. And there, surrounded by ordinary things, your soulmate is holding an extraordinary realization. They are thinking about you. Not casually. Not as a passing memory. They are thinking about the way your presence once made heavy moments feel lighter. They are remembering how you noticed what others ignored. They are replaying the moments when you offered patience without being asked, kindness without being rewarded, and love without demanding that it be performed in return. For a long time, they mistook those gifts for something common. They believed your loyalty would always be available. They believed your softness meant you would never leave. They believed your silence meant you had no boundaries. They believed your forgiveness meant there would never be a final consequence. But now the atmosphere around them feels different, because your energy is no longer leaning toward them in the same way. Something in you has begun to turn back toward yourself. And they can feel it. You may not have announced your healing. You may not have posted a declaration. You may not have sent one final message explaining every wound. Perhaps you simply became quieter. Perhaps you stopped checking. Perhaps you stopped reaching for your phone when their name crossed your mind. Perhaps you still cared, but you finally understood that caring for someone did not require abandoning yourself. That change created a silence they could not ignore. At first, they told themselves it was temporary. They expected you to return to the familiar pattern. They expected another thoughtful message, another gentle attempt, another sign that the door remained open. Days may have passed. Then more time. And the silence did not break. That was when something unexpected began to happen. They started remembering the smallest things. Not the dramatic moments. Not the arguments. Not the words spoken in frustration. The small things. The sound of your laugh when you forgot to protect yourself. The way you asked if they had eaten. The way you could hear sadness in their voice even when they said they were fine. The way you remembered details they had mentioned only once. The way your presence carried a kind of emotional shelter they never knew how to name. They had been standing beneath that shelter for so long that they forgot what the rain felt like. Now the rain has returned. And your absence has taught them what your presence could not. My beloved child, there is a painful truth woven into this story, but it is not meant to wound you. It is meant to free you. Sometimes a person does not understand the value of a light while they are still surrounded by it. They understand it when the room becomes dark. They do not recognize peace while someone is constantly creating it for them. They recognize it when chaos returns. They do not always know they were being loved deeply until they experience attention without care, closeness without safety, and words without sincerity. Your soulmate has begun to compare. They did not intend to. They may have entered new rooms, met new people, heard new voices, and tried to convince themselves that moving forward would be simple. Perhaps they assumed anyone could replace the comfort you gave. Perhaps they believed chemistry was enough. Perhaps they confused novelty with connection. But every new encounter quietly revealed something about you. Someone laughed, but it did not warm them in the same way. Someone listened, but did not hear what remained unspoken. Someone showed interest, but not devotion. Someone admired the version of them that was easy to love, while you had once stayed close to the parts of them that were frightened, uncertain, and unfinished. And slowly, the truth began gathering around them. You were not difficult to replace. You were impossible to duplicate. Pause there. Not because you are perfect. Not because this story asks you to place yourself above anyone else. You were irreplaceable because what you gave carried your unique imprint. Your love had been shaped by every lesson you survived, every tear you hid, every act of tenderness you chose even after life gave you reasons to become hard. They are only now realizing that your love was not ordinary affection. It was a refuge built from your own healing wounds. You knew how to comfort because you knew what it felt like to be left alone with pain. You knew how to remain patient because you remembered what it felt like to be misunderstood. You knew how to offer reassurance because you had spent too many nights calming your own heart. You gave them what you once needed. And they received it without understanding the price you paid to become capable of such tenderness. That is the revelation opening inside them now. But it is not the deepest one. There is something more. Something they discovered only after looking back at the moments they once dismissed. One evening, in this fictional scene, they opened an old conversation. They were not searching for anything important. At least, that is what they told themselves. Perhaps they were bored. Perhaps they were lonely. Perhaps a song brought your name into their thoughts. Their thumb moved slowly across the screen. There were your words. So simple. So sincere. Messages they once answered late. Messages they read without realizing how much courage it had taken you to send them. Messages filled with concern, humor, reassurance, and quiet loyalty. They read one line twice. Then again. Something changed in their face. The message was not dramatic. It did not contain a grand confession. It was something small, something like, I know you're carrying a lot. You don't have to explain everything. I'm still here. At the time, they had treated it as a comforting sentence. Now they understood it as evidence. You had seen them during a season when they could barely see themselves. You had stayed close when they were emotionally distant. You had made room for their confusion while hiding the fact that their uncertainty was slowly breaking your heart. They kept scrolling. And with every message, another layer fell away. They saw how often you tried. They saw how gently you spoke after being hurt. They saw how many times you reached across a distance they had created. They saw apologies you never owed. They saw questions they avoided. They saw the moment your messages became shorter. They saw the moment your warmth began protecting itself. They saw the slow departure happening long before you finally stopped reaching. And suddenly, they understood something that had remained hidden from them. You did not leave because you stopped loving them. You left because staying was teaching you to stop loving yourself. That truth entered them like a sudden wind through an open door. They placed the phone down. Then picked it up again. Their breathing changed. For the first time, they were not reading your words from the perspective of someone deciding whether you were enough. They were reading them as someone finally realizing they had been loved beyond what they deserved at the time. And that is when the feeling of too late began. Not because every possibility had disappeared. Not because the future had been sealed. But because the version of you who would have accepted the bare minimum no longer existed. The person they once knew was becoming someone new. You were learning to rest without waiting for their return. You were learning to smile without wondering whether they would notice. You were learning that peace could feel unfamiliar and still be safe. You were discovering that longing was not always a command to go back. You were remembering that your heart was not created to survive on occasional affection. And every step you took toward yourself created distance between you and the old pattern. They sensed it before they understood it. Now they understand it. That is why their realization carries both sorrow and unexpected joy. Yes, joy. You may wonder how joy could exist in a moment filled with regret. Listen closely. Their joy comes from finally seeing you clearly. For the first time, they are not viewing your love through the fog of fear, pride, distraction, or emotional immaturity. They are seeing the truth of who you were to them. That recognition is beautiful, even though it hurts. They feel joy because the memories they once avoided now appear sacred. They feel joy because they finally understand that someone once loved them with uncommon sincerity. They feel joy because your influence did not disappear when your messages stopped. It remained inside them. Your patience taught them what kindness looks like. Your honesty taught them what real connection requires. Your departure taught them what boundaries mean. Your silence taught them that love cannot survive where respect is repeatedly withheld. And now, without trying, you have become part of their transformation. They are changing because losing access to your heart forced them to face their own. But before you mistake this for a command to wait, hear the gentleness in what comes next. Their awakening is not your assignment. Their regret is not your responsibility. Their understanding does not erase your pain. You do not owe immediate access to someone simply because they have finally learned the lesson your tears tried to teach them. This story is not asking you to reopen a door that peace has helped you close. It is asking you to recognize your worth, even if they recognized it late. Perhaps a hidden question has lived inside you for a long time. Did they ever understand what they lost? Did your love matter? Did your absence affect them? Were you truly seen? In this fictional narration, the answer arrives slowly, like dawn entering a dark room. Yes, your love mattered. More than they admitted. More than they understood. More than their behavior showed. But the purpose of hearing that is not to pull you backward. It is to remove the burden of believing you were forgettable. You were never forgettable. They simply lacked the awareness to honor what they had. And that difference matters. Someone failing to recognize a treasure does not transform the treasure into something worthless. Someone mishandling your heart does not mean your heart was too much. Someone choosing confusion over commitment does not mean you were impossible to choose. Their limitations were never an accurate measurement of your value. You spent too long looking into an unprepared person and asking them to reflect your worth back to you. But a broken mirror cannot offer a clear image. You kept changing your angle. You kept adjusting yourself. You became quieter, softer, easier, more patient. You wondered whether you were asking for too much. You rehearsed conversations before speaking. You reduced your needs so they would not feel pressured. You forgave patterns that should have been addressed. You tried to become easier to keep. And still, you felt unseen. The problem was never that you were too difficult to love. The problem was that you were offering depth to someone who had not yet learned how to enter deep water without running back to the shore. Now the water is gone. And they are thirsty. That may sound harsh, but there is no punishment in it. Only consequence. Love does not always leave with anger. Sometimes love quietly withdraws its access after being taken for granted. Sometimes the most powerful thing a heart can say is nothing. Sometimes silence becomes the final boundary when words have been exhausted. You reached that place. Perhaps you did not feel powerful when you arrived there. Perhaps you felt broken. Perhaps you cried after choosing yourself. Perhaps every step away felt like betrayal because you had grown so accustomed to betraying your own needs instead. But heaven, as imagined in this story, looked upon that moment differently. It did not see abandonment. It saw awakening. It saw you gathering the pieces of yourself that had been scattered across unanswered questions. It saw you returning home to your own spirit. It saw your soul whisper, "I cannot keep begging for what should be given freely." And that whisper changed everything. Since then, invisible changes have been unfolding. You may not have noticed them at first. Your breathing became a little easier. A morning arrived when their name was not your first thought. A song played, and you made it through without breaking. You laughed and realized the sound belonged entirely to you. You looked at your phone and felt no urgency. You began making plans that did not include the possibility of their return. These moments seemed small, but they were signs. Your heart was loosening its grip on a future that had required you to remain emotionally suspended. You were becoming available for your own life again. And while you were healing, they were beginning to wake. The timing feels cruel, does it not? You once prayed for them to understand. You once imagined the relief of hearing them say, "I finally see what you meant to me." You believed those words would heal everything. But now, as that realization rises within them, you are no longer standing in the same place. That is the mystery. Sometimes the apology arrives after you no longer need it to survive. Sometimes the recognition comes after you have stopped performing for it. Sometimes a person becomes ready only after you have become unwilling to return to who you were. This does not mean the story is over. It means the story can no longer continue in the same way. Something must change. Either they must rise into the level of truth you once offered, or you must keep walking toward the life that is opening beyond them. There is no return to the old arrangement. That door has closed. Even if another door appears, it will require different people to walk through it. The old you cannot return. The old them cannot be welcomed. And deep inside, your soulmate knows this. That is why their realization is becoming urgent. They are not only afraid of losing you. They are afraid they already lost the version of you who would have waited forever. There was a time when one sincere message from them could have softened every wall. There was a time when a simple confession might have brought you running back. There was a time when you would have accepted words as proof. That time has passed. Now your heart asks different questions. Have they changed, or are they only lonely? Do they miss you, or do they miss being loved by you? Are they ready to honor your boundaries, or are they uncomfortable that you finally have them? Do they want a future, or do they want relief from regret? These questions are not bitterness. They are wisdom. And your wisdom frightens the version of them that once depended on your hope. They know they cannot return with half-truths. They know charm will not be enough. They know vague promises will no longer open the door. They know the next time they speak, every word must carry weight. This is where the unseen tension grows. Because they have been rehearsing something. A message. A confession. A truth they avoided for longer than they want to admit. In the quiet room beneath the pale evening sky, they typed your name. They wrote one sentence. Deleted it. Wrote another. Deleted that too. Their fingers hovered over the screen. How does a person explain that they finally understand something after understanding it can no longer guarantee another chance? How do they tell you that every distraction failed? How do they admit that the freedom they once wanted began to feel empty? How do they confess that the peace they felt with you was not ordinary, and that every connection afterward made that truth louder? They could not find the right words. Not because the feeling was weak. Because it was enormous. And beneath it, another secret remained. One they had not told anyone. After you pulled away, something happened in their life. A moment that forced them to remember you. At first, it seemed unrelated. A disappointment. A betrayal. A difficult night. Someone they trusted failed them in a way that mirrored how they once failed you. Suddenly, they were standing on the other side of the wound. They waited for a message that did not come. They hoped for reassurance that never arrived. They tried to explain their feelings to someone who remained emotionally unavailable. They experienced the confusion of receiving just enough care to keep hoping, but never enough consistency to feel secure. And there, inside that painful reflection, they saw you. Not physically. Emotionally. They felt what you had felt. The lesson was not revenge. It was revelation. For the first time, your past tears became understandable to them. They remembered moments when you asked for clarity. They remembered how they called you sensitive. They remembered the way they withdrew when you needed reassurance. They remembered asking for space without explaining what that space meant. They remembered returning whenever they felt lonely and disappearing whenever connection required courage. They remembered how patient you had been. And shame entered the room. But something else entered with it. Gratitude. They felt grateful that you had once offered them a love they did not yet know how to receive. They felt grateful that your presence had shown them a higher standard. They felt grateful that even your departure carried a lesson. That gratitude became the source of their unexpected joy. It was not the carefree joy of reunion. It was the sacred joy of awakening. They finally knew what real love had looked like. It had looked like you. Again, do not hear this as an invitation to place them at the center of your healing. This is your story too. Perhaps more than theirs. Because while they are learning your worth, you are learning something even greater. You are learning that your worth did not begin the moment they recognized it. It existed when they overlooked you. It existed when they chose distance. It existed when you cried. It existed when you questioned yourself. It existed when you received less than you deserved. It existed before them. It exists beyond them. And it will remain whether they return or remain silent forever. That realization is the true turning point. Your soulmate may finally understand your worth, but now you must decide whether you understand it too. Do you understand that love should not require you to disappear? Do you understand that compassion without boundaries becomes self-abandonment? Do you understand that forgiveness does not always mean restoration? Do you understand that someone can be meaningful to you and still be unable to meet you where you are? Do you understand that missing them does not mean you made the wrong choice? You are allowed to remember without returning. You are allowed to love without surrendering your peace. You are allowed to hope without putting your life on hold. You are allowed to hear an apology and still require evidence. You are allowed to choose the future over a familiar ache. This is the strength being born in you. And they can feel it from a distance. They may not understand how. But there is a difference between the energy of someone waiting and the energy of someone becoming. You are becoming. Your life is beginning to move. New thoughts are entering. New dreams are waking. Old parts of you are asking to be rediscovered. The version of you that existed before all the confusion is slowly returning, but not exactly as before. You are softer in some places. Stronger in others. More careful with access. More honest about what hurts. Less willing to call inconsistency love. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming clear. And clarity changes the way people approach you. Your soulmate senses that they can no longer appear casually. They cannot send a late-night message and expect you to fall back into the old rhythm. They cannot offer nostalgia in place of commitment. They cannot speak about missing you without speaking about what they are prepared to change. They cannot ask for another chance while remaining the same person who broke the first one. This awareness has brought them to a threshold. They have written the message again. This time, they did not delete it. But they have not sent it yet. Something is stopping them. Fear, perhaps. Pride, perhaps. Or the knowledge that once they tell you the truth, they will no longer be able to hide from the consequences of it. Because the message contains more than regret. It contains a confession about the night they finally understood everything. That night began with laughter. They were with other people, trying to appear fine. Music filled the room. Glasses clinked. Conversations overlapped. Someone made a joke. Your soulmate smiled at the right moment, but their mind was somewhere else. Then someone mentioned love. Not you. Not directly. They asked a simple question: who was the person who loved you best? The room grew strangely quiet inside them. Around them, voices continued.